God, the Wall Street Journal front page is always so depressing.
I mean, life is depressing.
Air travel's messed up. Oil prices make the Dow go down. Wildland firefighters face lack of mental health support.
Don't they always talk about how the negative headlines get all the clicks or whatever? Maybe
do.
that's part of this.
As dollar surges, Americans buy up European homes. Fourth grade reading and math scores plummet.
Not good.
Not good. Hopes up for Fed pivot have faded. It's all bad. It's all.
This is a good cold open, though. We can use this.
I'm sad now.
Well, let's cheer you up. We're going to do another episode. Should we start the show, Nick?
Let's start.
Let's start the show. All right, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Full Grain Podcast. I'm Phil Callis here with Nick Horween.
Hi, everybody.
And we had a depressing cold open, but that's not to say that the world isn't that bad, right, Nick?
We're going to be okay.
Well, I mean, we're great. I'm great. How are you?
I feel good.
You good?
I feel good.
All right, today we're going to talk about a loaded word, sustainability. And I've read some interesting comments about that word sustainability. It might not be an appropriate word to use. And we've been talking about this a bit because everything we do has an impact. So we're going to talk a little bit about the impact that the clothing industry has, the leather industry has, humans have maybe, and some of the things that we're seeing on our small scale of the tanning world.
It's a good sentiment. It's a good place to go, or a good place to try to go, but there are so many pieces that fit into it that I think it's easy to get lost in the specifics of certain things and not maybe pay attention to the things that are most important or that I feel like are very important in informing something like that. And by that I mean specifically speaking about leather and leather alternatives. So if you're looking at like a piece of leather, like a leather jacket versus an imitation leather jacket, I mean, that real leather jacket is going to last a lot longer. That imitation leather jacket is essentially plastic, and it's going to be around for the next 500 years. It's not a biodegradable product because it's petroleum and plastic based. And I think that that's not something that people think about, even when they're talking about or thinking about footwear or the production of materials that go into footwear.
When I was working with you at the tannery, we would get an environmental audit. In the last decade, I'd say, there's been more emphasis on this consideration of like how long and how much environmental impact do we have.
When you talk about that audit, which in itself is kind of it's not that interesting of a topic if you're looking at like the metrics and all that stuff, but the results are interesting in that, it tells you how much water and energy it takes to make a square foot or, some measurable amount of the leather. That sort of gives you, I guess, like a grade for the lack of a better definition. And, that is supposed to create some sort of common metric or common language so that you can judge, one producer against the other. But it's almost an impossible task to try to capture everything.
Why?
Well, the product life cycle is a perfect example. I mean, how do you measure that? Like you can't measure, a pair of Goodyear welted quarter-inch shoes, 40 years into the future. And I mean, you can maybe measure a pair of, running sneakers that are going to last someone a year. Once the product leaves the factory and goes to the consumer, it's sort of the data kind of goes away. So we can only control what we can control inside. And, that's the reduction of water where possible and, paying attention to how much water we're using and, looking at formulations and seeing, do we actually need that much of that product in it? Which means, time and energy without affecting the quality at all. Because I mean, if we can reduce the amount of water we're using and offer something that's the same quality, like that's a win. But if we're reducing it to a point that it starts to affect the product, then we're not gonna do that because it affects the final product, which we're not willing to do.
I do think that there is a value in just having the scoring system, even if it's not fully encompassing. And here's why. Once we started to become aware that there was an issue, we started taking some action. So a funny example that I can think of is every department, all of them had their own refrigerator. Those refrigerators weren't very modern. I mean, this is things that have that's the way we did it, so we just left it there. So these refrigerators from like the 60s.
Or older. Yeah.
Certainly not low energy users. So what we did was we said, hey, we're going to give you guys some time, but we're going to transition away from the refrigerators, and we're going to give you ice and coolers, and we're going to reduce our energy usage. What are the efforts? I know the refrigerator's a small example, but are there other things that you've done there to that on those same lines?
The water thing is big. So we the reduction. I think we've reduced water usage by 30%. And if you look at the overall production, and that's just taking a look at old formulas that we did it that way because it had always been that way. And we were able to just make changes and just add less water in some places, which was, took a lot of time to try it out because we didn't want to, again, affect the quality. But that's been probably the most meaningful, and then we've, like the refrigerator is a perfect example. There's, turning water spigots off when you're not using them. And it's just like, it's just
simple
being
stuff. Conscious
is an important thing. And then over the years, I mean, everything is water-based now. All the finishes are water-based. The usage of solvents is not something that people, it's just not, you're not using that stuff anymore. So that's been a big one. I mean, I like all of the dyes and stuff. It was good that it made us take a look at things. And I do agree. I agree with the mission, I guess, which is to take a look at things and say, how much energy does it take? Where is the raw material coming from? How are you treating? Because it's not just environmental. It's like a factory. How are you treating your employees? How much are they working? Because there are factories and other places in the world that maybe aren't as nice to their employees.
What's the name of the protocol again?
Well, the one I think we're talking about is it's the Leather Working Group.
LWG.
Yeah, and then the audit is done by one company, which is one of my issues, but because that company is for profit, which I think is kind of, they're interested in auditing you as much as they can and changing the audit from year to year so that they have to audit you and keeping it as complicated as possible so that they have to be the ones that do it. But that's maybe a cynical way to look at it. But
well, so why I know the answer to this, so maybe I'll just say it, is I know that there are customers that were making product all over the world, and they would get caught in a news story like we were just reading, say like, look, you got child labor, or this factory that you use is just pumping wastewater into drinking water.
That's true. I think,
and that's why this audit came about.
The specific incident or issue that has always been highlighted to me was that a big brand was buying leather from a tannery that was sourcing hides from cattle that had been grazed on land that was previously rainforest. So they had cleared a portion of the rainforest to create pasture for these animals. And then that leather ended up in shoes. And then when that came out, that was a big issue because they were supporting, the clearing of rainforest, which is
indirectly, of course.
Yeah. But I mean, you have to go back pretty far, but that's the traceability. That's how far back the traceability goes because they want to make sure that you're being responsible from what's coming in the door to what you're putting out the door.
Especially in a large city like Chicago, there's pretty proper laws around wastewater.
Effluent.
That, we take for granted, right? It's like, you treat your water, and I don't think that's the case most places. So the example that I'm thinking of is when we first were introduced to this auditor, he had just come in fresh from
somewhere else in the world.
And he said, I was just at this other tannery, and we had to fail them. We did the whole audit. And we had to fail them.
Basically A+ for the whole thing.
Yeah, your water usage is great. You're not using a lot of water. You're not using a lot of energy. It's great.
Modern factory.
And they were pumping effluent into the environment just directly.
They're just, instead of having a treatment facility that then went into, a municipal sewer system so that it could be checked and treated again, which is the way we do it. It was just going straight into, I don't know, I remember we said river or something, something not good. So you do, everything is great, then you walk out the back and you're like, well,
What are you doing?
Yeah, this is important too.
So to their credit, that's an immediate fail for him. Maybe you could explain how you do it too.
Yeah, so everything, I mean, we're responsible for all the water that comes in, and then all the water that goes out, we get charged for both.
You also get charged for the rain water that...
Sometimes we can apply for an exception or an exemption for if there's a big rain, because it overwhelms our system in some cases. But so we capture all of the processed water that we generate every day, and then that processed water gets tested and treated, and then put back into the municipal sewer. I got it.
Municipal?
Municipal sewer system, which then goes to a treatment plant, a treatment facility, which in Illinois, which I think is actually the biggest in the country, in Stickney, town. And then they test it and treat it again, as when it gets diluted and goes back into all the other water that they're treating. So that's how we do it. I mean, we're sort of a one man because we're pretty vertically integrated in terms of how tanneries are. In other places in the world, there are multiple tanneries in single locations. I'm thinking specifically about Italy and parts of Asia. So there are treatment facilities that then collect from multiple places. So that treatment facility is in itself a business, is my understanding. So they're collecting the water, treating it, and then putting it out. So the tanneries are still responsible for their water and still paying to get it treated, but they're not solely responsible for the treatment of it. If that's a very long answer, but
one of the things I had come across, a T-shirt brand that I like called Ask It. I was explaining their philosophy about traceability, and they show their full impact. And you said, "Oh, this kind of sounds like Patagonia." And the interesting thing that you've kept reminding me about that I think is appropriate is sustainability might not be the most appropriate word for this because everything you do has some impact. So generally speaking, how do you view the word sustainability, and what sort of actions do you want to look for in the things that you buy? What do you want brands to do about it that you'd feel comfortable putting your hard-earned money towards?
I like the Patagonia example. There was an article written a while ago, and their founder, Yvon Chouinard, I think that's how you say his name, who is a pretty remarkable person in my view, just in terms of what he's done building that company and still staying involved. But he was saying that no matter what you make or how you make it, there's always an impact. So you have to reduce that impact as much as possible. And his definition or his quote is sort of make it the least bad that you can, which I don't really like approaching it, thinking about that way, but do the best that you can to use the least and then make a product that'll last the longest. I mean, I think that's the goal. It's not just to use as little as possible. It's to then turn into something that's of quality.
And you told me not to use these words together, vegan leather. Does Patagonia do a vegan leather something?
I don't think so.
I wonder why.
I don't think they do any. I mean, they use some leather from us.
Yeah.
What
do they use?
Some bison. They use an olive tanned bison product for some boots that they make.
Why is it that I am not allowed to use the two words vegan and leather together?
Well, according to the FTC, it's deceptive because leather, those two words, they can't exist in the same. Because they define leather, you could say imitation leather or synthetic leather, but vegan leather is misleading because those words can't exist together.
I see, because leather has an inherent meaning to be from an animal's skin.
Yep, I see. That's how I interpret it.
Well, I also done some reading. I'm interested by the concept of the stuff made from fruit. I don't know if you've seen the stuff made out of cactus. They make some stuff out of pineapple. I'd be curious to see what it looks like. So I'm not fully informed on quote unquote vegan leather. But this article that I was reading, it was about vegan leather sustainability, being a little critical of them. They said it's a material that mimics leather, but it's created from artificial or plant products instead of animal skins. It's also most often made from two different plastic polymers, polyurethane, PU, and polyvinyl chloride, PVC. So essentially it's plastic. And you mentioned at the top that plastic takes 500 years to degrade. What was that stat?
That's just a number that I found in one of the articles that I was looking at before we did this. I was trying to
Synthetic
find
leathers, imitation leather, et cetera, are essentially plastics and take up to 500 years to biodegrade.
that article was looking at microplastics, and I hope no one's rolling their eyes that we're getting into this stuff. But I didn't realize the impact that just those synthetic fibers have. I mean, they were saying that 35% of the microplastics that are in the ocean are from washing your clothes. So just washing your workout stuff or whatever you have that's not wool or cotton. That when you wash it, that some of those fibers come out of the clothes. I mean, just like any other thing, it's slowly breaking down every time you wash it. That was making me think about the vegan leather thing. I mean, it's not like you're putting vegan leather in the washing machine, but the comparison exists in my mind.
Yeah.
And I said vegan leather, even though
We'll see.
not supposed to.
You're not allowed to, FTC says. So I have a quote here from the UN Environment Program. This is a little bit more about the fast fashion. Are you familiar with fast fashion? Do you do any of that?
We do not. Our lead times, it takes us too long to make stuff.
Have you heard of Shein?
The tannery?
No, there's a fast fashion brand called Shein that sort of blew up on social media, and it's a huge trend.
Is that the one that is relatively inexpensive stuff, and they put tons of new stuff every day?
Yes, yeah. And it's incredibly inexpensive.
Yeah, I heard of it. It's factory to consumer, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I have heard of that. I forgot the name.
Financially, they're probably doing great, but this article is critical of companies like that, fast fashion type of things. So the fashion industry is the second biggest consumer of water, and it's responsible. This is a big range. It's responsible from 2 to 8% of global carbon emissions. So fashion industry, all of it, not just fast fashion. The average consumer buys 60% more pieces of clothing than 15 years ago, and each item is only kept for half as long. So we're buying more stuff and using it less, which again, to the point that you illuminated to me a decade ago, the product life cycle seems to be
compressed.
The biggest driver, like the denominator of this whole thing. So that's concerning.
Buying more stuff requires more energy and everything to make, which has an impact. And then keeping it half as long and having it end up wherever it's going to end up has an impact too.
But it's so fun. It's so fun to buy new stuff.
It is fun. And I mean, obviously people do think it's fun, and that's why it's so popular.
Honestly, so I've got guitars around here. I love looking at guitars and shopping for guitars. I rarely buy them. And I suspect if a guitar was like $5, I'd have so many guitars. So I think I understand it. It's the same with boots and stuff, except the bigger price tag. I have a lot of boots, and I certainly can't wear them all. It does feel like what they argue for of just shopping your closet first or shopping at a thrift store for like a leather good, for example, is something that's a prime candidate for, being a positive, just to outweigh some of the negatives, I suppose, instead of buying something new. But that's really, like, if I start to think about it, it's like, what makes something more durable and everlasting? I gave a stupid example earlier of like, well, I need a boot or shoe or belt or wallet. I want something that's going to last. So in the case of a shoe, what's the most durable material that exists, right? It's probably some type of metal. Yeah, I don't know. What's durable?
I don't know. I mean,
what's something that's never going to break?
But you can't make a shoe out of that.
Every time I start to think deeply about it, it's like, well, leather seems to be the perfect choice. So it looks good, or can look good. I guess it could look crap. It seems to last. You can polish it up. It's breathable. I actually don't know if the imitation leather stuff is.
I don't think it is, from what I read. I don't have any of it. I haven't worn any of it, but
canvas doesn't last. I wore canvas shoes. If people are going to eat meat, it does seem like leather is a really healthy choice. People have brought up to me the point before. When I go to a party or something and meet new people, oh, what do you do for work? Yeah, I make leather goods. And sometimes the question comes up of, what happens when all meat is lab grown? So I was thinking about it a bit, and I still feel like leather is a good choice because there are going to be animals, but it either means that leather is going to be more expensive or just not be a marketable, like large scale business. But what do you know, if lab grown meat is now the norm, what do you think happens to your business?
I mean, I don't think it would be around, at least not in the way that it is now. I mean, there might be still some things to tan, or maybe there are lab grown hides, but I mean, we're an industry of byproducts. I mean, we're in Chicago because the stockyards were here and all the animals were coming here, and we were at that time close to our primary raw material.
I mean, does that keep you up at night?
It doesn't, because if that happens, then that's the way that it's supposed to go, and then that's the way that it'll go. I think that maybe controversial, but the way we are set up as a country, as a world, the amount of food that we need and the type of food that we eat has created a certain way of generating that food, and that model exists, and that creates the hides that we use, and those byproducts there's plentiful. There are a lot of hides available.
You're saying you're not being very direct. You're saying it's controversial to eat meat?
I just think I do.
I didn't realize.
I was avoiding.
I didn't realize it was.
I do think because I think that there's some conversation about factory farming, and what that looks like, and how there's a big impact there, or there can be an impact there, and then there's a move away from that, or an idea to move away from that. But I think that like anything else, that developed to serve a market and to serve a need, and that's why it's around. And that model creates a lot of hides, and we use those hides. And I think that even in a model that is different than that, if you look at something that's more
just full pasture animals,
whatever the ultimate goal is, that's still going to generate that raw material. There'll just be less of it, I think, because I don't think that those methods can sustain the quantities that the current methods do. Not saying that I agree with the methods or I like to be, tied to those methods. I'm sort of ambivalent about that, but
I'm really just putting screws to you.
Well,
I didn't realize that it was you were so nervous about it.
No, I'm not nervous. I don't, it exists. It's there. It's pretty, it's not like it's a hidden thing, but it's something I think about. I think about that more than I think about hides going away completely.
Well, something that comes up a lot too is American, specifically United States culture around horses. And that's another question I get frequently about the horse leather, which doesn't concern me at all. But for a lot of Americans, it's really scary to think about, like a horse hide being used in a wallet, which I always find confusing because, same person asking me is wearing a bovine leather shoe. And to me, it's the same. We have this love affair with horses, and the slaughtering of horses in the United States is an interesting topic too.
You are putting the screws to me today.
Well, you can avoid this question.
No, I don't.
All this.
I don't. Let's go. Let's try it. Let's go.
I don't think it's that intense, honestly.
No, I think that we're really used to it, and it's something that we've thought about a lot. And I think that sometimes,
good point,
you can come across as callous a little bit, as just like, oh, how could you be so heartless?
It's my name.
Yeah. But I think that maybe that's the.
No, you're right.
Maybe that's it. But yeah,
right.
It's another. We do tan horsehide, and we're not the only ones in the world that do it. It's another byproduct of food. Those hides don't come from the U.S. because there's no market for
horse meat
here. They actually outlawed I was going to say processing. They outlawed the slaughter of horses in the U.S. for a while, which is not the case anymore.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
When did that change? It must have been recently.
Years ago, but not that long ago. But when they outlawed it, that effectively they made it illegal. That put all of the packing houses out of business.
Were they raising horses for food?
No, they weren't. States? It was, my understanding is that it was horses that were workhorses that were at the end of their lives, or injured horses, or horses that had, it was not, none of this was for human consumption. I don't know exactly what it was for, but
Well, some of the sad stories that I had heard is once they outlawed the killing of horses in this country, is the rancher or whoever would send off the animal to a border and not feed them on the way and just slaughter them anyways.
yeah, they were sending them to Mexico or Canada, or just letting them go.
So that's even worse.
And
right?
they're just like,
letting them go is fine. I'm good with that.
And they're domesticated animals, and they would last like a week.
Okay.
That's mean too.
Yeah, I guess I did.
I mean, I think there's no like happy good end in this story, but it's like, again, it's like going back to the impact thing, like pick the least worst of them and try to go there.
Have you had horse meat?
I have not. I would.
I haven't either. I would too. Apparently it's really good. But where is that market for that meat?
So in Europe and Quebec, that's where we source our horse hides from. I mean, you can get horse hides.
No, not the hides, but the meat.
So, where the hides come from, where the meat is being consumed. We're picky because we want the biggest horse hides, because those give us the biggest pieces of shell cordovan.
You look at big butts.
Exactly. But I've gotten samples of hides from, like, you get into like the Asian steppe, like Kazakhstan and those places where there's tons of horses, because historically there's a big horse culture there, but the horses are hardy and small. They eat horse there too, but the hides don't. They don't suit our purposes. So I think it's more, there's more of it in the world than maybe people think about. But it's a companion animal in the United States, so I get it.
Yeah, I get it too.
Yeah.
It's like dogs in Korea or whatever. I think that's the thing.
Let's not do that.
We're not going there. Well, let's talk about traceability, because you mentioned the different sourcing of hides. And I'll give an example that I had heard recently, again, from that Ascot brand that I think is fascinating to hear from them. And they're talking about how they trace their cotton from the farm to your t-shirt. And they said it's really difficult to know exactly where the cotton in the shirt you're wearing came from, because all the cotton gets aggregated into one lot and they'll be sold by brokers in an auction. And the manufacturer will receive that lot and not know how it was aggregated together. How do you track incoming hides? Can you track them to a field?
No, it's actually similar. We use all North American hides, other than the horse hides that come from Europe. So they're all North American. So we know they're all from the central U.S. basically. We were getting some from Canada. We're not really doing that anymore. But those raw materials for us are coming from places where there are established regulations, and there are.
Do you get certificates of that?
I mean, they're coming. It's like Tyson and big places that are very much scrutinized by the laws, but also by the public. So I think that it has the effect of making them responsible.
What was the name of the brand? Their meat, pretty fancy meat. Starts with a B. Fancy meat place that. Give me the name. You made leather for them out of their hides.
Oh, I don't know if they're even around.
I
think it was Bennett?
Campo.
Samsonite.
That was way off. So I remember you were making some stuff for Campo. That's an interesting method too, where they're using the whole animal. What's crazy is
they're gone though.
Are Belcampo's gone? Oh, really?
Bye Belcampo, the high-end meat company from LA list, October 2021.
See, there's your news right there. That's the news segment.
They were trying to be vertically integrated, though.
That was an interesting concept. Mm-hmm. So, I think hundreds of years ago, the people that lived on this continent kind of had it right. We're going to use all the animal and respect it. And I think that's what Belcampo was doing. So that's really sad to hear that they're not around.
Yeah, I mean, so they were raising the cattle for beef, processing the animals themselves, and then they had the butchers, and then they had the restaurants too.
So they were doing that whole
I think they
traceability thing.
I think they owned the ranches where the steers were being raised. So they had, it was totally vertical. And then they were taking the hides, and they sent us the hides, and then they used those hides to upholster stuff in their restaurants. So great.
Using all of it, yeah.
Yeah, great idea. I'm not sure how.
I remember the meat was really expensive.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine It was. I mean, it's expensive to do it, that way.
Well, I think that's maybe how we wrap up this conversation is everything has a cost, including that, which is probably the most transparent way. It's just going to be more expensive, which is perhaps good. So news story for today, which we're awful at actual news. So we like to look at news that was relevant years ago and talk about it today. Although this one is kind of relevant.
We could just say that we recorded this podcast at that time.
So
and then released it.
It's 2015 today.
Years later.
So Patagonia in 2015 announced that they're moving away from durable water repellent, which they call fluorinated DWR. And their goal was to have this removed from their products by right now, fall of 2022. Tell me a little bit about this, Nick. You came up with this.
So I think the DWR conversation is interesting. And we talked about Patagonia a little bit earlier, and they're very conscious of what they're doing and the impact that they're making. But, they've identified this waterproofing method as being harmful because it is.
Their words were suspected carcinogen.
Yeah, I'm not totally exactly.
Excuse me. Let me clarify just because this seems important. The fluorinated DWR contains PFCs, which are a suspected carcinogen.
Yeah. So the Patagonia's idea to move away from that, I think, is a good one. But they're saying that they can move away from it with 90% of their products, but 10% of them still will use it because it's still better at being waterproof than the alternatives.
We were talking about breathability with the leather stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because that's
the concern
that's
here.
a breathability or a breathable that keeps the product breathable, is my understanding.
Is breathability a word?
I believe so.
All right, breathability.
I think you're okay.
Ability to take a breath.
Yeah.
Because you could wear what's the alternative material?
I mean, they have another
latex,
another coating technology that they're working on that's not as effective. They don't actually have the name of it. It's just like through a different company, I think. But you do like the rubber coated
vinyl
canvas, vinyl, which is great, but then it cracks sometimes, and it's not waterproof with the cracks, and then also it doesn't breathe at all. So if you're doing anything active, you don't really want to be in a vinyl jacket.
If I was on Deadliest Catch, do you remember this fishing show?
You would want a vinyl.
Like, it wouldn't even want this fluorinated DWR.
No, it's not. It's probably not tough enough.
Super tough.
Yeah.
Got it.
Because even those DWR coatings break down over time. Because I've got old rain jackets that aren't waterproof anymore because my informed or educated assumption is that coating, because every time you wash it, you're not supposed to wash it with certain kinds of detergent and all this stuff because you're gonna start to affect the waterproofing ability.
Well, if anybody has ever washed their waterproof something or other, they'll know that detergents and soaps, surfactants, kill waterproofing.
Yep.
That's also true in the leather world. So I know something that bothers me a bit about the word waterproof on leather. It's a little bit misleading also because you can make a waterproof leather and I can make some sort of construction that has literal holes in it. And then it's like you're still selling it, or I would still sell it as waterproof leather, but it's nonsense because there's literally like an air hole in the boot or whatever. What is the spec for waterproof leather? Like, what does that mean in your world?
It depends. Different things to different customers. There are different, different specifications, like for footwear for the public versus like military footwear. I mean, there are different requirements, but generally it means there's a test that the leather has to pass, and that's you cut a little square of the leather, you put it in a machine, the machine dips the leather in water and flexes it repeatedly, and you have to no water can come into the little cup of leather that's been made for a certain number of flexes. And
so it's like, imagine a boat that is made of leather sitting in water,
and then you're
flexing it.
You're sitting in the middle of it, and you're bending it and flexing it, and you want to see how many flexes it takes before you start to see water coming through.
Right.
So there's there are numbers, 20,000 flexes or whatever, so that they can say that, it's not going to, no water is going to come into this shoe for that many flexes, but it's such a, I mean, you're not wearing the shoe in that environment, so it's a little bit of a weird test.
Yeah,
but
you're not floating it on water. It's a weird test, and let's be super generous. So you hit the 20,000 flexes. Let's say you hit 100,000 flexes. That's on one shoe. So it's really 200,000 steps. So you're going to get 20 days before it's not waterproof. Am I thinking of this correctly?
I've never broken it down that way in my mind. It's always just like, we got to get those flexes.
Yeah, right. But like, am I thinking of this crazy? That seems ridiculous. Like
Yeah.
you're waterproof for a week? Anyways,
Yeah, I don't.
that bothers me a bit.
But you're also not submerged. I mean,
Yeah.
So the test, I think, it's sort of designed to be too
That's
over
a good point.
too over the top.
That's a good point. I'm not thinking of it the right way. The other one that gets me too is a lot of people say, well, hey, I've seen these pictures of Chrome Excel and the water just beads up. That Chrome Excel is waterproof, right? I'm like, not really.
Well, it's water resistant. I mean, we used to be able to call waterproof. I mean, the standards have changed. I mean, that's
So give me the distinction between waterproof and water resistant.
I mean, just what you said. I mean, you can call. We get into the top grain, full grain conversation here, or like
That's the name of the show, Nick.
I guess if in this scenario, the waterproof is like the full grain, and then the water resistant is like it will shed some water, but it's not waterproof. But we want to put a marketing word on this, so we're going to put water resistant on it.
I see.
So it's just, I mean, really in the Chrome Excel case, it's just because it's really oily. There's a lot of oil in it, so oil and water can't go in the same place at the same time. So it will shed water really well for a while.
It tends to beat up and roll off, is my experience.
For a while, yeah.
Yeah, and then to me, the waterproof test is more about penetration, with the water going through
All the way
skin.
through,
Yeah, that's a big distinction. It's actually, I think this is part of what we were talking about with the full audit process that you were going through. Is I think people opening their eyes to certain topics is interesting because it will help us find new, better, different ways to come up with new stuff. That's how we innovate and change and grow. So I think it's cool that Patagonia, they seem like a leader on most of this stuff, right?
I think so. I think that,
And people are going to follow them along.
yeah, I
with
think
this.
that, they, not to like plug Patagonia and how great they are, but
You love Patagonia. I think you do, actually.
my kids do.
Let's go to favorites. Is Patagonia a favorite, or you got a different favorite?
Sure.
You had nothing else? All right. Well, what do you like from Patagonia?
I mean,
Or what do your kids like, I guess?
the kids stuff is great. I think that it's definitely expensive, or I think it's expensive, but we buy Patagonia stuff for my 7-year-old, and then he beats it up, and it's still okay. It's still in good shape, and then my 3-year-old gets to wear it. So we get like 2 runs through it, and then if it's still in presentable shape, then we give it to a friend, and they use it too, or we donate it, and someone else can use it. So we're back into product life cycle again, where it's we're getting instead of buying something from a big box store that's $4 and then you wash it 3 times and it falls apart. I've got this Patagonia raincoat that's probably DWR,
Yeah.
but it works great, and then probably goes through 3-4 different kids over 20 years. I don't know.
How do you wash that coat?
We just wash it normally.
It's waterproof still?
Oh,
wow.
It just gets so dirty with the kids that it's just like it's like spot clean only. It's like there's no way
In the wash. Yeah.
in the wash. Yeah, usually just with a lot, like as little detergent as possible, or sometimes no detergent. If it's just like surface dirt,
All right.
it's like just do water.
Makes sense.
But you can use back from my more outdoorsy days, powder detergent, I've been told, is better than the liquid stuff. I don't know why.
For not getting rid of waterproofing?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. What about for cleaning stuff?
I think
It's all the same.
I think it's all the same.
Yeah. We do liquid. So
Yeah.
I'd probably move to powder.
I think I used to have powder just to wash all my like skiing stuff.
Have you ever ate one of those pods?
Never, not once.
I heard
that's a
I heard
thing.
that's great. I'm going to give you my favorite and wrap up the show here. have you seen, I don't know when this episode is going to come out, but we're recording this after the second episode of House of the Dragon has come out. Have you seen any of that?
Yeah.
Did you see all of it?
I did.
What do you think?
I like it.
I freaking love
I'm
it.
a nerd. I like swords and stuff. It's like it sort of fits.
Not a lot of swords in the second episode.
No, but I'm just saying like the
It's good
the
though.
era,
The vibe. You like
it's
a medieval
another-
vibe.
I do. It's another make 'em up, which I kind of like those.
Make them up.
Yeah.
What's that?
I mean, it has dragons in it, and
Oh, fantasy.
yeah, it's like not.
Make them up.
It's not. I mean, there's no. It's like you have to suspend your belief in reality because it's totally fantasy. But I like it. Yeah, it's good. Well, I mean, I've heard really mixed reviews on it.
Really?
Yeah, some people weren't so keen on it. I heard, but
I'm glad I haven't read reviews. I think it would probably make it worse. But I am actually surprised at how much I like it because I enjoyed the last couple episodes of Game of Thrones, but it certainly wasn't the same show and not as good. But like I watched it and it was fun enough. But this feels like old Game of Thrones to me. And it's great. So I don't know though if they're going to turn it into like the Star Wars thing on Disney where it's like, how many spin-offs can we do? So that concerns me a bit because there is something to be said for like ending a thing. Right? I don't know. So that's a concern, but right now I'm having a lot of fun. And I don't watch a lot of TV. So when I have something to look forward to on Sunday, it like actually makes me happy. So it's like I'm actually happy to have something I like again. Anyways, thanks for another episode, Nick.
thank you.
Everybody, if you're enjoying the show, by the time this comes out, we don't even have, when we're recording this today, we don't even have any website or anything. But I'd imagine you'd be able to leave a review. So leave us a review telling us what you think about the show. Things that we should improve too. I'm not looking for 5 stars. Just tell us what's up. And if you have any comments or questions, you can email us at fullgrainpodcast@gmail.com. So thanks again, Nick.
Thanks, Bill.
What are you doing with the rest of the day? Going to get kids?
Going back to work.
All right, me too. See you guys.
See ya.